Welcome to Westbury Analytics Radio, where ServiceNow performance analytics for senior executives comes alive. Experienced ServiceNow architects, performance management experts, and other executives in your field share insights for how to drive performance management using the power of ServiceNow performance analytics. Performance analytics is a game changer, but it requires a different way of thinking than how most people think about reporting and performance measurement. Our goal here is to help you develop that new way of thinking. I am your host, Pedro Soto.
Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto. Welcome back, our listeners, to another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. Our guest today is Rae Ann Bruno. Rae Ann is the owner of Business Solutions Training, where she provides training and consulting on ITIL best practices and process reengineering, among many other things. Now, today we're going to talk about measuring the success of knowledge-centered service. But before we jump into our topic, Rae Ann, welcome. Would you share a little bit more with our listeners about you and Business Solutions Training?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me, Pedro. I started out, like many consultants, as a practitioner, spent about 16 years, started out as a trainer/technical writer, moved into managing a team like that, and then moved into support. So a lot of what I learned the hard way. I worked for some large electrical manufacturing companies, one that was very driven toward the business drove everything that we did. And then when I had changed companies, we were trying to fix a broken IT and become those business partners. So that really helped me learn a lot about the challenges, about really being partners with the business. And certainly I used some wrong metrics and put them out there. So we learned what the metrics are that are important, or how to distinguish between metrics that we use to gain efficiencies and metrics to show that we're adding value to the business. So as a consultant, I've been doing that since about 2002. And I should correct that. I started out as training. And ironically, it was KCS where I had some people in class, and the director had come to me and asked if I could consult for them so that they could implement it. And I said, oh, no, I'm not a consultant. I'll get you one. And he's like, no, we want you. And he asked me a few different times and a few different ways. And finally he said, Rae Ann, will you come in and train us on how to implement? Because I was determined to stay a trainer, but it helped me immensely, and it also really started to build my passion for KCS. And I've worked with a lot of companies implementing that. And as you said, I am all about process reengineering and the customer experience and how all of this is behind the scenes to help overall that user or customer experience. So I've been doing that for a little while now. Sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating how things will work out in our lives. This gentleman that insisted you come and do consulting for them, and that sort of was an interesting pivot in your life, and here you are.
That's right. He changed it for me, for sure.
That's very cool. Awesome. So our topic today, measuring the success of KCS. Why don't we start first from your awesome experience over the years, talk a little bit about KCS, what it is, what it isn't, why it's powerful, and then we can dive into the metrics part of the conversation.
Okay, that's a great and also complex question. So first of all, what is KCS? I think we live in a KCS world, and I think that's the best way to understand what it is. And I think about when my kids, I have two boys, 20 and 21, and when they were really young, they would ask me something, and if my answer was ever, I don't know, they'd say, Mommy, will you ask the computer? So I think we live in this world where everybody knows that they can find their answers, or they should be able to.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of lagged behind in businesses to be able to do that effectively. And I think most people, they have a misunderstanding. They look at KCS as being traditional knowledge engineering, which typically you have a dedicated team owning that responsibility. Your support people, who are the people that are interacting with the customers and usually have the knowledge, they're submitting knowledge articles, waiting for those to get perfected and improved and then published. But the truth is, and we all know this, that they're sharing answers with each other even before that knowledge article ever gets published. They're throwing it in chat, writing it on Post-its, sending it in email. They're sharing it everywhere, and we're unaware of what's out there and whether it's right or whether it isn't. And I think what a lot of organizations suffer when they're doing the knowledge engineering is, one is that time to publishing, so it's losing value by the time it's out there. And then the other one is that it becomes very cumbersome to use knowledge, because when they search, they get this huge list of answers, and they have to try to go through that and still try to be pretty fluid with interacting with the customers. So it actually becomes an impediment. And that's the reason I think a lot of companies start looking for a better solution. And then also along those lines, it's typically written from the expert's viewpoint. And so if you get a new hire and they're listening to what the customer is saying and they're looking for that knowledge, they don't find it because they're not using the same words. Yeah. So that's another element that's incredibly powerful with KCS, is that it's written in the context of the customer, which not only benefits your new hires or benefits you while you're working with the customers with the right words, but it also benefits the users when it goes into self-help. Then they can find it in their own words. So do you feel like that's a decent enough description?
Yeah, it is. So in a KCS implementation, you're working with, you still use that when there's a team dedicated to curating and generating the knowledge content. Do you start working with them to retrain them and to address these issues?
That's a great question. What happens with KCS is you don't have that dedicated team of owners any longer. Your support team becomes the owners. However, you will have some people overseeing that entire methodology. Like you'll have a knowledge manager, but that person isn't about making sure that these dedicated resources are finding the answers. Instead, they're looking to see, is our knowledge healthy? Are we using it appropriately? Are we getting better at meeting our goals? And let me back up for a moment. I think that often when people or companies start down the path of implementing any kind of knowledge solution, they often have very limited, their impression of success is based on how many knowledge articles do we have?
Yes.
And are we finding the answers when we need to have them? And are we using them? And their belief is when we stop using them, it's because somebody now knows the answer and they don't need to have the knowledge base any longer. So when you've got this new methodology, everybody's part of that knowledge team. However, someone's going to oversee to make sure we've got someone managing the peer coaches. We've got someone looking at this health of the knowledge base and constantly improving it. And I can give some examples as we go through it, but it does change. So what I see often is people will send their current knowledge engineers to training, and they feel really uncomfortable once they learn that KCS doesn't really have that role. Now, you do have something called knowledge domain experts, and those are more or less your subject matter experts looking in their respective areas, making sure the knowledge is working. But their roles often change. And I did work with a company where they had sent 2 knowledge engineers to the training, and it was really interesting to watch. Their role prior to that was, okay, an article submitted, let me go talk to the business analyst, let me get the right information, let me put it out there, let me make sure it follows the proper structure. And then they became the people who helped to make this successful within their company, and they totally understood the methodology, and they created a structure to help the coaches to be successful, help the teams to be successful, and help them to get better at what they do every day.
So their role changed. They were no longer just knowledge engineers. They were becoming knowledge domain experts or working with the knowledge domain experts to make sure the knowledge got disseminated appropriately?
So in this particular company, what they became is what I call coach leads. So they created this incredible coaching program. So what they did is they made sure everybody was trained. They measured things like, are people linking articles? And what happens, it's your coaches that are instrumental. So when we talk about the success of KCS, first, the goals should be well beyond having a knowledge base. The goals should be in helping our organization be more productive, in getting people back to productivity more quickly, maybe even in fixing our services or improving our services on a regular basis, and being better for the business in general. So what they did is they helped to identify who the coaches should be. They trained them, and then they made sure that those coaches were actually coaching on a regular basis. And to explain that role, they are peers. They're people that are taking support tickets themselves, and they're also taking the time to score articles. It's called a quality index, and then to sit down with the coachees and help them to see. There is a standard guide, a content, so you have a content standard and a style guide, but it's not really expensive. It's just pretty much, is it in the customer context? Do we have, full solutions in here? That kind of thing. So they work with the coachees, and their goal is to help them improve the quality of what they're creating, and also to give them more rights within the knowledge base, such as being able to modify other people's articles. And I can explain that aspect of the methodology a little more, which would probably be helpful.
Yeah, please,
Okay,
because
so,
I'm understanding this as I haven't understood it before, so I really
okay,
doing this.
that's
So yeah,
good to
go ahead
hear.
with
Okay,
the methodology.
all right. So there's an acronym called OUFA, and what that means is with every ticket coming into support, you should either use an existing article, fix or flag an article. So you earn those rights through creating great knowledge. And if you've earned modify rights, then you can fix an article. If not, then you can only fix your own articles that you authored, and you can flag other articles. So that's putting a note on it. So let me give you an example that I use in class often. And this kind of shows how this methodology works and also the benefit of earning the rights. So let's say that I get this support call, and I don't know the answer, but I track it down. I call some people and email them all this, and so I create this article with 8 steps in it. And then let's say that you get a call, and it's the same question, and when you search, you find my article. It's not yet validated. It's not been proven in any way, outside of me thinking that it fixed the one that I was working with. So you're looking at it, and you've been here a little longer, and you get to step 3, and you say, you know what, I think there's this, no, you don't need to do that. And you take out 3 steps. Now you've made it 5 steps. And so then let's say another peer gets the call. They find the article that I created that you improved because you had modify rights. They follow the 5 steps, and now that article has been used 3 times. So 3 of us have linked it to a ticket, and now it may get into the state of being validated. And to understand this whole validation, I always ask people, have you ever done anything that because you found the answer on the internet? Maybe you found a YouTube video, maybe you found documentation, and then what made you trust that? And they'll tell you a lot of things. Some of them will watch it and make sure it works. Sometimes it might be a reputable resource.
Yep.
Other times it's because that it came up to the top, it was reused so many times, or because of the comments and the ratings, the thumbs up.
Yep.
So people are looking for validation that something works. We're doing the same thing within the business. And then the ad is, I've searched multiple times. So I searched what the user said, and then I searched what I think they meant, and then I might have learned more, and I searched again, and if I didn't find it, then I would add it. So then what happens is every time a ticket, an article is linked to a ticket, that's called reuse, and that is showing us demand. So we're now learning what the demand is, what information does the business need to have. Maybe it's a how-to. People don't know how to do this. That could drive better training. Maybe something's not working properly. Maybe even if we have a workaround, we now know this is still impacting the business, so maybe this is something we need to resolve permanently. Does that help a little better?
Totally. Yeah. I think now we have a nice little basis. I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but you've just given us a nice overlay of the land. And let's talk about metrics, because then I can see, as you just said, reuse shows demand. That sounds like an interesting metric to keep track of, but I'm sure you have an approach to it. So share with us what should leaders in the service desk or the ITSM office be thinking about when it comes to metrics to measure the success of a knowledge-centered service program?
Okay, well, there are a few metrics, and I think this is where we've got to be really clear. First, we need to know what our goals are. So if somebody's, like for example, that first company that had asked me to help them, he had 2 what I didn't know at the time were really tough goals to quantify. But he said, here are the two things that I really want. He said, we have external customers, and they're continually complaining that they get a different answer from everybody they talk to.
Yep.
And so I want to have consistent answers. And then the other thing that he wanted is it was a company that many of the executives had started out in stores, and so a lot of people knew them. And so there were frequently calls to the executives complaining about support. And he said, I want to stop the calls to executives. Yeah. And those are two tough things to measure. But what we looked at that's really comes back to customer feedback, right? So he stopped hearing, I get different answer from everyone, started to see some consistency. Some of that was measured in the quality monitoring program where they were listening to the calls and finding that they were giving the answers. But on the efficiency side, what we needed to measure was link accuracy. Were people linking the right articles? Were they even participating, meaning were they linking articles? Were they using the knowledge articles while they were working with their users? And part of that, again, goes back to call monitoring. I'm listening, or if you've got the right tool set, I can even see that you've searched the knowledge base, you found that answer, you gave it as it was documented, and now we become more consistent. So on the efficiency side or the mechanics side, we need to measure that people are doing OUFA, that they are participating, so they're doing what they're supposed to in the knowledge base, that they're linking the right articles. And we even look at something called citations, and that is, so if I get back to the example where I created that initial article and then you improved it, we would get a citation showing that someone is reusing our articles. So you start to see that as people create good articles, more people are using them, and we're ultimately going to get that out to self-help. But I want to go back to your reuse for a minute. There's a concept, and you can see this on the Consortium of Service Innovations website. It's in any KCS training, but it's something called the funnel to the cloud, and it's a really great visual. And if you think about it, it's saying if you look at assisted support as a funnel, the largest part of the funnel is going to take in the most volume, which is your tier 1. So let's say they have 10,000 issues coming in. They handle the 80-20 rule at 8,000, pass on 2,000. That first point of escalation or second tier, they see 2,000 issues that are impacting the organization. They pass that on to third tier, which is often development. They see about 400, and then when it gets to the tier who's deciding what errors are we going to eliminate, what are the defects we're going to fix in the next, which is the same thing, the next release, what are we going to release? They're seeing 80 out of 10,000. Yeah. So their view is so limited. But when you add KCS, and now you start to measure reuse, I might see, wow, they're using this workaround, 800 times a week. We better do something to have a permanent solution. So it gives visibility across IT, not only to be better at support, but to be better at our, to make our services better, and to help the organization to be more productive. So those are part of them. I can give you a lot more metrics on the effectiveness side, but I wanted to see first if you have any questions based on that.
No, it's pretty straightforward. So on the efficiency side, we talked about, tracking, doing OUFA, are folks participating, are they linking the right articles? And then you mentioned this funnel to the cloud, which is a fascinating perspective on how the KCS can really make a big difference versus the typical, waiting for a certain number of tickets to trickle up to the level 3, level 4. That's on efficiency. Let's talk a little bit about adding value, the metric side of that.
And the way you summed it up actually starts to talk about it, right? Because you said, now when you see this and it goes across these levels, well, that is value. If I can make a service easier to use, if I can automate something, if I can put requests into the service catalog so you don't have to wait in a queue or go to a walk-up desk, or if I can give you back time, or give you a 24/7 access to what those answers are. And again, that's what people expect. When I say we live in a KCS world, in 2015, millennials became the largest part of the workforce, and they didn't totally grow up with technology, but they grew up with it enough in their lives that they have these certain expectations. They expect to find the answers when they need to have them, and they would like to do that pretty quickly in their workflow, and then they want someone to be available if it's more complex. So that's part of the value that we can add, is that we can provide that self-help, we can provide that automation, we can make our teams available for those more business-critical types of aspects. So one level of quality is the quality index, which the peer coaching, they score the articles so we get better quality knowledge overall. And then here's where I always try to encourage people, look beyond the knowledge base. The real reason you're doing this, what is the real reason, right?
Yeah.
It's based on value. So part of that is we want to get people back to work more quickly. So we should be able to measure time to resolution. What we should do is we should be measuring those efficiency metrics and their effect on our other processes. So because of what we're doing in knowledge, our time to resolution is reducing. Our escalations to other tiers are reducing, so our first contact resolution is getting higher. We're freeing up capacity at other levels. And here's a perfect example from a company. There was a third tier guy in a class, and he shared a story because I had done some training for them before they implemented KCS, and he said, I wanted to tell you about this. He said, first, a few months ago, we had this major issue. He said, so I finished the article with the right answer. I figured it out. He said the service desk used it 27 times in 30 minutes. So that in itself is pretty impressive, yes.
Yeah.
So that's 27 escalations that did not go up to that third tier. However, from the capacity perspective, he made this comment, and he said, that's when KCS really kicked in for my team. He said, as a matter of fact, it's working so well that I was able to learn PowerShell. I wrote a script to deploy Windows 7. I deployed it to 500 machines, and we only had one call to the service desk. So just think about the value in all of that, right? First of all, we've improved our deployment. We've reduced your need to get support. We've automated something. So this capacity, when you start minimizing escalations, you're opening capacity across IT so that we can fix our defects, so that we can improve our services, and we're getting the information that we need to have from what we're measuring in KCS. So those are some of them.
Yeah,
and then
typically when you free up capacity, you're freeing up people to do much higher value things.
Exactly. And that's what we want to be able to start promoting, as being business partners as well. And then there are some that people, are probably a little more aware of, like self-help deflection. So what are we deflecting through putting things out in self-help and again, being available for those more business critical types of issues.
That's awesome.
And there's something else that maybe I should have mentioned on the efficiency side when you asked what service desk managers should care about.
Yes.
The other one is when you get a new hire, and this is actually from the words of a first-tier manager at a company, and I always hear this from every company, so not necessarily the same time frames, but the same point. There's a metric called time to proficiency, and the thought is when you get a new hire, they're not proficient on their own for a while.
Right. Yep.
And if you think about that, the impact is they're reaching out to other people who aren't being as proficient either because they're helping this person. Yep. So her comment was, it used to be that I took 6 to 8 weeks to train a new hire. And then when I put them on the phones, it took about another month before they were operating at the same level as my seasoned employees. She said, well, now with KCS, I have them learn how to use KCS. I put them on the phones at the end of the second week, and by the end of the third week, they're meeting the metrics that my seasoned employees are meeting. So that's something we call time to proficiency, and just think about the impact of that. That is huge. So that's a big metric on the efficiency side.
This is really exciting, and I'm sure we're probably just scratching the surface, and we're sort of coming at the end of our session here. So maybe you'll accept an invitation to come and talk later, and we can take it a little bit further.
Sure, I'd love to.
Yeah, awesome. In the meantime, Rae Ann, what would you say to our listeners, how they can find you? Is there anything sort of special that you can point to that you're doing in the near future that might sort of motivate them to reach out?
Well, I don't actually have anything tied specifically to knowledge. I'm speaking at a couple of conferences on the customer experience and some topics around that. I do have some white papers, some bright talks, some things that are out there, but I'm happy if you want to put my contact information. I'm happy to answer people's questions and provide content if needed or anything that they would like.
All right. Yeah, I will do that. Definitely will do that. So Rae Ann, thank you so much. And I think next time we have you on the show, we could talk about customer experience.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you. I'd enjoy that.
All right.
We see a time when all business leaders using ServiceNow Performance Analytics will easily know how to leverage its power to help them reach their business goals. Performance Analytics offers you a way to do that. To discover how you can get there faster, send us an email to info@westburyanalytics.com.